The delivery driver brings groceries inside for disabled customer, not knowing cameras were recording every gentle movement of his hands as he arranged the milk just so in the refrigerator, every patient smile as he asked where the cereal belonged. Marco Delgado hadn't planned on spending his entire lunch break organizing an elderly woman's kitchen, but something in Eleanor Wright's eyes, a mixture of pride and desperation, had spoken to a place inside him he thought had gone dormant years ago. Marco's back ached as he climbed back into his delivery van. 10 hours into a 12-hour shift, his body protested every movement. 23 deliveries down, 5 to go. The November wind bit through his thin company jacket, a constant reminder of the coming winter and the heating bills he couldn't afford to pay. 3 months behind on rent, a stack of medical bills from his mother's last hospital stay, and the constant dread of his phone ringing with another collector's call. These were the weights he carried alongside the grocery bags and packages. He glanced at his watch. Spending those extra 15 minutes helping Ms. Wright had put him behind schedule. His supervisor, Vance, had already written him up twice this month for inefficiency. One more, and his already precarious employment would be in jeopardy. Marco turned the key in the ignition, willing the old van to start on the first try. It sputtered, hesitated, then reluctantly rumbled to life. "Just hold together a little longer," he whispered, patting the dashboard like an old friend. The van, like Marco himself, was running on fumes and borrowed time. Across town, Eleanor Wright sat in her wheelchair by the window, watching the delivery van disappear around the corner. At 74, her world had shrunk to the confines of her modest one-bedroom apartment. The stroke 3 years ago had taken her mobility, her garden, her independence, but not her dignity. At least that's what she told herself on good days. Today had not started as a good day. Her arthritis had flared during the night, transforming her fingers into swollen, useless appendages. The special grips for her silverware and toothbrush offered little help when her hands refused to cooperate. The simple act of making tea had become an exercise in frustration and spilled water. By the time she'd heard the delivery van pull up, Eleanor had been fighting tears of helpless anger. She hadn't expected kindness from a stranger. Hadn't expected the young man with tired eyes to notice her struggle with the grocery bags. Hadn't expected him to ask in a voice so gentle it almost broke her, "Would you like some help putting these away, ma'am?" Eleanor touched the neatly arranged items in her refrigerator. For the first time in months, she could reach everything without straining. The canned goods sat on lower shelves, her favorite teas within easy grasp on the counter. Small adjustments that made an immeasurable difference. Her gaze drifted to the small security camera in the corner of her kitchen. A gift from her son, David, who worried about her living alone. Eleanor had resented the cameras at first, viewing them as an invasion of her privacy, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. Now she was grateful. The kindness of the delivery driver had been captured, preserved, evidence that goodness still existed in a world that often felt indifferent to her struggles. With fingers that protested every movement, Eleanor reached for her phone. Marco finished his route an hour late, the van's headlights cutting through early evening darkness as he pulled into the Grocer Go parking lot. His shoulders slumped with exhaustion as he completed his end-of-day paperwork. The employee break room was empty, save for the flickering fluorescent light and the persistent drip from the sink no one had bothered to fix. "Delgado." Vance's voice, sharp as a whip, made Marco flinch. "My office." Now, Marco's stomach tightened. This was it. The third write-up. The end of a job he couldn't afford to lose. He followed his supervisor down the narrow hallway, mentally calculating how long his meager savings would last, how many bill payments he could defer, what possessions he might sell. Vance's office was a glorified closet, dominated by a metal desk cluttered with papers and a computer monitor that had seen better days. The supervisor settled into his chair with the air of a man who enjoyed the small power his position afforded him. "I received a call today," Vance began, his tone unreadable, "about your performance." Marco's throat went dry. "Sir, I can explain about being late." Vance held up a hand. "The call wasn't a complaint, Delgado." Something shifted in the supervisor's face. Was that reluctant respect? It was from a customer, Eleanor Wright. She sent video from her security cameras showing you spending extra time helping her put away groceries, rearranging her kitchen for better accessibility. Marco blinked, confused. "I didn't know there were cameras. She needed help and She called the regional manager directly, sent the footage, said you treated her with more dignity than her own healthcare workers." Vance tapped a pen against his desk. "The company's been getting heat about our public image. Bad reviews, complaints about rushed deliveries, damaged goods." Marco waited for the other shoe to drop. for Vance to tell him that despite the nice call, rules were rules and tardiness couldn't be tolerated. Corporate wants to use the footage in a new advertising campaign. Grocer Go, we deliver more than groceries, that kind of thing. Vance looked physically pained to deliver good news. They're offering you a bonus, and they want you to be the face of the new community outreach program they're launching. The words didn't make sense at first. Marco had been braced for termination, not recognition. I don't understand. Make no mistake, you're still behind schedule too often, Vance muttered. But apparently corporate thinks kindness sells groceries. You'll report to regional offices tomorrow at 9 for a meeting. He thrust a paper across the desk. Sign here, acknowledging receipt of the information. Marco signed with numb fingers, his mind struggling to process this unexpected turn. As he left the office, Vance called after him. Don't let it go to your head, Delgado. You just got lucky someone was watching. Lucky? Marco didn't feel lucky as he trudged to his rusty Honda Civic in the far corner of the employee lot. He felt exposed, as if the private moment between him and Miss Wright had been transformed into something performative. The thought of cameras capturing what he'd considered a simple human interaction made his skin crawl. But then again, the bonus would cover his overdue rent, and a stable position with the community outreach program had to be better than racing against the clock for deliveries, enduring Vance's constant criticism. His phone buzzed with a text from his younger sister, Lucia. Mama's asking for you. Bad day. Can you come? Marco rested his forehead against the steering wheel for a moment, gathering what little energy he had left. His mother's early onset dementia meant she sometimes didn't recognize him, sometimes cried for her son even when he sat right beside her. Lucia bore the brunt of the caregiving, having moved back home when their mother's condition worsened. The least he could do was show up when needed. On my way, he texted back. As Marco drove through the darkened streets of Oak Hill, his mind wandered back to Miss Wright. Had she known her call would change the trajectory of his employment? Had she intended to help him as he'd helped her? The symmetry of it felt significant somehow, like a conversation conducted through actions rather than words. Eleanor's evening routine took twice as long on bad days. Tonight, her arthritis made even the simple task of changing into night clothes a painful ordeal. But as she maneuvered her wheelchair toward the bedroom, she felt lighter than she had in months. The young delivery man, Marco, she learned when she called the company, had shown her a kindness that asked nothing in return. No awkward gratitude required, no sense of obligation or indebtedness. Just one human being seeing another struggle and offering help. The rarity of such an encounter made it all the more precious. Her phone chimed with a text message from David. Checked your camera feeds. Who was the guy in your kitchen today? Everything okay? Eleanor sighed. Her son meant well, but his constant monitoring sometimes felt like another loss of independence. Grocery delivery driver. She typed slowly, one painful letter at a time. Very helpful young man. Nothing to worry about. David's response came quickly. You shouldn't let strangers stay in the house, Mom. Not safe. Eleanor didn't bother responding. David couldn't understand what it cost her to accept help, how hard-won her trust had been. The delivery driver's kindness had been a gift, and she refused to let her son's well-intentioned paranoia tarnish it. She maneuvered into bed, arranging her body among the pillows that supported her weakened left side. Tomorrow would bring her regular physical therapy session, an hour of frustration and incremental progress that left her exhausted. But tonight, she would fall asleep remembering the simple dignity of being treated as a person first and a disability second. Marco arrived at his childhood home just after 9 p.m. The small bungalow's porch light cast a yellow glow across the cracked concrete steps. Inside, he found Lucia at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around her laptop. At 24, she should have been finishing graduate school, pursuing her dreams of becoming a physical therapist. Instead, she was taking online classes part-time while caring for their mother. She's in the living room, Lucia said, rubbing her eyes. Keeps asking for you. Thinks you're still 16? Marco squeezed his sister's shoulder as he passed. Get some sleep. I'll sit with her. Rosa Delgado sat in her favorite armchair, a crocheted blanket across her lap despite the warmth of the house. At 63, she looked a decade older, her once vibrant face now often vacant or confused. Tonight, however, her eyes brightened with recognition when Marco entered. Marquito, she said, using his childhood nickname. You're late. I was worried. I'm sorry, Mama. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hand in his. Work ran long. She patted his face with her free hand. Such a good boy. Always working so hard. For a moment, she seemed fully present, her eyes clear and focused. Then a shadow passed over her face. Your father will be angry if you miss dinner again. Marco's father had been gone for 8 years, but in his mother's fractured memory, Jose Delgado still came home each evening, still expected dinner on the table, still ruled their household with his unpredictable temper and rare, precious moments of tenderness. It's okay, Mama, Marco said gently. Dad's not here tonight. Confusion clouded her eyes. Where did he go? On a trip, Marco answered, using the explanation that seemed to comfort her most. He'll be gone for a while. Rosa nodded, though uncertainty remained in her expression. You must be hungry. Let me make you something. She tried to rise, but Marco kept her gently in place. I already ate, Mama. Why don't I make you some tea instead? In the kitchen, Lucia had closed her books and was leaning against the counter, waiting for the kettle to boil. How is she? In and out. Marco reached for the chamomile tea his mother preferred. Better than last week. Lucia's exhaustion was evident in the dark circles under her eyes, in the slump of her shoulders. The doctor wants to adjust her medication again. Says it might help with the sundowning. Marco thought of the stack of medical bills already sitting on his apartment counter. How much? Insurance should cover most of it. Lucia didn't meet his eyes, which told him everything he needed to know. I might be getting a promotion, he said, surprising himself with the admission. Or something like it. Better pay, at least. Lucia looked up, hope flickering across her tired face. Really? That's great, Marco. He explained about Miss Wright, the security footage, the unexpected meeting with corporate tomorrow. As he spoke, he realized how surreal it all seemed. That a simple act of kindness might actually improve his circumstances, rather than delay him further. See? Lucia said, attempting a smile. Good things happen to good people sometimes. Marco wasn't sure he believed that anymore. Hadn't believed it since their father's death left them with nothing but debts and painful memories, since their mother's diagnosis had stolen her from them inch by inch, since every step forward seemed to be met with 2 steps back. But he returned his sister's smile anyway. Sometimes, he agreed. The next morning arrived too quickly, gray dawn light filtering through Marco's bedroom window. He'd spent the night on his mother's couch, unwilling to leave Lucia alone after seeing her exhaustion. Now dressed in the cleanest button-down shirt he owned and the only tie he hadn't pawned, he felt like an imposter as he approached the gleaming glass headquarters of Grocer Go Regional Distribution. The receptionist directed him to a conference room on the 3rd floor, where a group of marketing executives and HR representatives waited. The meeting was a blur of corporate jargon, excited talk about authentic content, and relatability metrics. They showed him the edited security footage. His movements slowed down, soft music added in post-production, Ms. Wright's expression of grateful surprise highlighted with careful zooms. We'd like you to lead our new senior support initiative, explained Diane Hoffman, the marketing director. Specialized delivery services for elderly and disabled customers. Extra time built into routes for assistance. You'll train other drivers. Be the face of the program. It came with a substantial raise, health benefits that would cover his mother, and regular hours that would allow him to help Lucia more consistently. It was everything Marco needed, arriving from the most unexpected direction. Why me? He asked when the presentation concluded. Diane's practiced smile faltered slightly, revealing something more genuine beneath. Because you didn't know you were being recorded, Mr. Delgado. You weren't performing kindness for an audience. That's what makes the footage so powerful. She glanced at her colleagues. And frankly, we need that kind of authenticity right now. Marco thought about declining, about telling them he didn't want to be part of some corporate PR strategy. But then he thought of his mother's medical bills, of Lucia's interrupted education, of his own grinding exhaustion from working multiple jobs. Sometimes good fortune came wrapped in uncomfortable packaging. When do I start? He asked. 3 days later, Marco found himself back at Eleanor Wright's apartment, this time as part of his official training program. He'd requested to include her on his regular route, feeling a strange sense of connection to the woman whose security cameras had inadvertently changed his life. Eleanor answered the door with surprise. You're back. Marco smiled, holding up a grocery bag. I've been assigned to a new program. Specialized delivery for customers who might need extra assistance. He hesitated. If that's okay with you, Ms. Wright. She studied him for a moment, then wheeled back to allow him entry. I suppose I could use the help, as long as it's not charity. Not charity, Marco assured her, following her into the kitchen. It's my job now. Actually, you're kind of the reason this program exists. As he unpacked the groceries, placing items where he remembered she preferred them, Marco explained the changes at Grocer Go. Eleanor listened quietly, her expression unreadable. So they're using me to improve their image, she said finally. Marco winced. I suppose that's one way to look at it. And using you as well. They're also paying me better and giving me stable hours, Marco pointed out. And other customers like you will get the help they need without feeling rushed. Eleanor considered this. A mutual exploitation then. I can live with that. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. And I get to have my groceries arranged properly. Over the following weeks, Marco visited Eleanor's apartment every Tuesday and Friday, delivering groceries and often staying to chat. He learned that she had been an English professor before her retirement, that her husband had died a decade earlier, that her son lived 3 states away and managed his guilt through excessive concern and security cameras. David means well, she told Marco one gray December afternoon, but he's always been better with problems he can solve from a distance. When I had the stroke, he set up a perfect system of home care and monitoring technology. Everything except actually being here. Marco thought of Lucia, bearing the daily weight of their mother's care. Some people can't handle seeing the people they love suffer, and some people shoulder that burden every day. Eleanor said, her shrewd eyes seeing more than Marco had intended to reveal. Which kind are you, Marco? He considered the question as he reorganized her pantry, placing her favorite crackers on a lower shelf. I'm trying to be the kind that shows up, he said finally. Even when it's hard, even when I don't know what to do. Eleanor nodded, satisfied with his answer. That's the only kind that matters in the end. As Christmas approached, the Grocer Go Senior Support Initiative gained traction. Local news covered the program, interviewing elderly customers who praised the service. Marco found himself training other drivers, explaining the importance of patience, of dignity, of seeing the person beyond the delivery. His face appeared on company materials, his story simplified into an uplifting corporate narrative. The authenticity that Diane had valued became increasingly scripted, packaged for maximum inspirational impact. Marco played his part, grateful for the steady paycheck and the health insurance that now covered his mother's new medications. But it was the unscripted moments with Eleanor that anchored him. Their conversations about books she had taught, stories she shared about her decades of marriage, her sharp observations about a world that often rendered the elderly invisible. People either see too much or too little of me, she told him once. My disability or my age becomes the only thing they notice, or they're so determined not to notice that they ignore me entirely. You saw me as a person first. That's rarer than you might think. Marco thought of his mother, of how people's expressions changed when they learned of her dementia. The subtle shift from engagement to discomfort, from connection to pity. I understand more than you might think, he replied. One Tuesday in mid-December, Marco arrived at Eleanor's apartment to find her in visible pain, her arthritis flaring badly in the cold weather. I can come back later, he offered, seeing her struggle to sign for the delivery. Nonsense, Eleanor said through gritted teeth. The groceries won't put themselves away. Marco worked quietly, arranging the kitchen while Eleanor sat at her small dining table, massaging her swollen fingers. When he finished, instead of leaving, he filled her kettle and set it to boil. You don't need to do that, Eleanor protested. It's not part of the job, Marco agreed, taking down her favorite teacup. This is just me, making tea for a friend who's having a rough day. Something softened in Eleanor's expression. Friend, she repeated as if testing the word. I suppose we are, aren't we? Marco prepared the tea the way he'd learned she liked it. 1 sugar, a splash of milk added last. As he set the cup before her, Eleanor caught his hand. I have physical therapy this afternoon, she said. My regular helper called in sick. I don't suppose... Marco checked his watch. 3 more deliveries scheduled, but he could rearrange his route. What time? Relief washed over Eleanor's face. 2 o'clock. I'd take a taxi, but getting in and out is such an ordeal. I'll be back at 1:30, Marco promised. That afternoon, Marco waited in the physical therapy center's reception area, flipping through outdated magazines while Eleanor worked with her therapist. Through the glass partition, he could see her determination as she struggled to complete each exercise, the momentary flash of triumph when she succeeded, the frustration when her body refused to cooperate. It reminded him of his mother's good days, when glimpses of her former self shone through the fog of dementia. Brief victories in an unwinnable war against time and illness. There was dignity in that fight, in refusing to surrender quietly to diminishment. When the session ended, Eleanor emerged flushed and exhausted. Marco wheeled her back to his car, noting how she remained silent during the drive, her energy depleted. At her apartment, he helped her inside, prepared a light dinner from the groceries he delivered earlier, and set it within easy reach before preparing to leave. "Thank you," Eleanor said, her voice stronger after rest. "Not just for today, for seeing me." Marco thought of all the people who remained unseen. His mother in her confusion, Lucia in her exhausted sacrifice, himself in his daily struggle to stay afloat. "We all need to be seen," he said simply. As he turned to go, Eleanor called after him. "The camera in the living room has been recording all of this, you know. Your company might be interested in this footage too." Marco shook his head. "Some things aren't for public consumption, Ms. Wright. This was just one human being helping another. No cameras needed." Eleanor's answering smile held a warmth that followed Marco out into the cold December evening. That night, as Marco sat beside his mother's bed, helping her arrange her pillows, he found himself thinking about Eleanor's words. "You saw me as a person first." Rosa looked up at him, momentary clarity in her eyes. "You look tired, mijo." "I'm okay, Mama." She reached up to touch his cheek, her hand cool against his skin, always taking care of everyone. "Who takes care of you?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't need taking care of." Rosa's expression turned knowing. A glimpse of the mother she had been before illness stole her consistency. "Everyone needs taking care of sometimes, even the strong ones, especially the strong ones." Before Marco could respond, the moment of lucidity passed, and his mother's attention drifted to something only she could see. But her words lingered, an echo of wisdom from the woman who had once been his anchor. The week before Christmas, a heavy snowstorm blanketed Oak Hill, bringing the city to a standstill. Grocer Go's delivery services were suspended for non-essential items, but medical supplies and emergency food deliveries continued on a limited basis. Marco volunteered for the emergency route, his Honda's snow tires better equipped than the company vans for the treacherous conditions. His list included several of his regular senior customers, Eleanor among them. He arrived at her apartment to find the building without power, the hallways dim and cold. Eleanor answered his knock wrapped in blankets, her wheelchair positioned near the gas fireplace that provided the apartment's only heat and light. "My hero," she said dryly, though relief showed in her eyes. "I was beginning to think I'd have to subsist on stale crackers and willpower." Marco stamped snow from his boots before entering. "Building manager says power might be out until tomorrow. Do you have somewhere you can go? Family nearby?" Eleanor's laugh held little humor. "David's in Phoenix. My other son, Michael, is stationed overseas. The neighbors are nice enough, but..." She gestured to her wheelchair. "Evacuating me is complicated." Marco thought of his mother and Lucia, warm in their small home with its reliable furnace, of the empty second bedroom that had once been his, of Eleanor, alone in a darkening apartment as temperatures dropped. "You could come home with me," he said, surprising himself. "Just until the power's back. We have room." Eleanor studied him in the firelight. "I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition. My mother... Marco hesitated, then decided on honesty. "She has dementia. Early onset. She might not remember you from one moment to the next, but she loves company. And my sister could use another adult to talk to besides me." Something shifted in Eleanor's expression. Understanding, recognition of a shared vulnerability. "If you're sure..." "I'm sure," Marco said, and was surprised to find it was true. An hour later, after careful preparation and a slow journey through snow-covered streets, Marco helped Eleanor into his childhood home. Lucia's surprise quickly gave way to warm hospitality, and Rosa Delgado, in one of her clearer moments, fussed over their unexpected guest like a lifelong friend. "You're too thin," she told Eleanor, insisting she try the pozole simmering on the stove. "Winter is no time to waste away." Eleanor accepted the bowl with grateful hands. "It smells wonderful, Mrs. Delgado." "Rosa," Marco's mother corrected. "Friends use first names." As the evening progressed, Marco watched in amazement as Eleanor drew his mother into conversation, finding the threads of lucidity and gently guiding her back when she wandered. There was no awkwardness, no pitying glances, just one woman engaging with another, accepting the rhythm of presence and absence. Lucia sidled up beside Marco as he washed dishes. "She's good with Mom," she observed quietly. "Most people get frustrated or give up." Marco nodded. "Eleanor understands what it's like to be defined by what you can't do instead of who you are." Later, as Rosa drifted to sleep in her armchair, Eleanor wheeled closer to Marco and Lucia. "Thank you for opening your home to me. It's been too long since I've been part of a family dinner." Lucia squeezed her shoulder. "You're welcome anytime. Seriously. Mom likes you, and she doesn't warm up to many people these days." "The feeling is mutual," Eleanor said. "Your mother is a remarkable woman. So are you, Lucia. The care you provide, It doesn't go unnoticed. Lucia blinked rapidly, unused to acknowledgement of her daily sacrifice. It's what family does. Yes, Eleanor agreed. But that doesn't make it easy or unremarkable. That night, as snow continued to fall outside, Eleanor slept in Marco's old bedroom. Rosa in her room down the hall, and Marco on the couch. Lucia, unable to sleep, sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea. She said she used to be a professor. Lucia whispered when Marco joined her. English literature. I told her I had to drop my favorite elective, 19th century women writers, when Mom got worse. She stared into her mug. Eleanor offered to tutor me through the material if I wanted to try independent study. Said she'd been teaching it for 30 years before her stroke. Marco smiled. You should take her up on it. You think she meant it? It wasn't just being polite? Eleanor Wright doesn't say things she doesn't mean, Marco assured her. Trust me on that. The power returned to Eleanor's building the next day, but the unexpected sleepover had broken some invisible barrier. She began joining the Delgados for Sunday dinners, her academic background proving the perfect complement to Lucia's interrupted education. In return, Lucia helped Eleanor with physical exercises that supplemented her formal therapy, showing her adaptations she'd learned in her PT courses. Marco watched this unexpected friendship bloom with a sense of wonder. Two women from different generations, backgrounds, and circumstances, finding common ground in their roles as caregivers and care receivers, teachers and students. Christmas Eve arrived with another snowfall, gentler this time, dusting Oak Hill with crystalline beauty. Marco's final delivery of the day was to Eleanor, a special package he'd arranged himself. A vintage collection of Jane Austen novels he'd found at a used bookstore, their leather bindings worn but still elegant. Eleanor opened the gift with careful hands. Oh, Marco, she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed covers. These are beautiful. Merry Christmas, he said, pleased by her reaction. I thought maybe you could read them with Lucia. She mentioned wanting to study Austen next. A perfect suggestion. Eleanor wheeled to her bookshelf and returned with a wrapped package. I have something for you as well. Inside the neatly wrapped box, Marco found a high-quality winter coat, far nicer than anything he could afford for himself. Your jacket is too thin for this weather, Eleanor said matter-of-factly. A delivery driver needs proper protection from the elements. The gift brought an unexpected lump to Marco's throat. How long had it been since someone had noticed what he needed and provided it without being asked? Thank you, he managed. You're expected for dinner tomorrow, Eleanor continued briskly. Your mother invited me last Sunday, and I've been instructed to bring you and Lucia. I believe she's making something special. Marco smiled at the memory of his mother in a moment of perfect clarity, insisting that Eleanor join them for Christmas dinner. We'll be there. As he prepared to leave, Eleanor called him back. Marco, the security footage from that first day, the company sent me a copy. For their records, they said. She hesitated. I watch it sometimes when I'm having a difficult day, to remind myself that kindness still exists in unexpected places. Marco hadn't thought about those security cameras in weeks. The corporate promotion of his story had faded into the background of his daily work, the manufactured narrative less important than the genuine connections he'd formed. I'm glad something good came from being recorded without my knowledge, he said with a wry smile. Eleanor's expression turned serious. Something good came from your kindness, Marco. The cameras just happened to capture it. She held his gaze. Don't ever think your actions don't matter. Even the smallest kindnesses ripple outward in ways we can't predict. On Christmas Day, as Marco helped his mother into the car for the short drive to Eleanor's apartment, Rosa patted his hand. I like your friend, she said clearly. She sees you. Marco thought of Eleanor's words about being seen as a person first, of how his mother, even through the fog of her illness, had recognized the same quality in Eleanor that he had found so compelling. Yes, he agreed. She does. Eleanor's apartment was transformed for the occasion. Lucia had arrived early to help decorate, and now a small Christmas tree glowed in the corner, its lights reflecting in the window that overlooked the snow-covered courtyard. The table was set with Eleanor's best china, and the aroma of holiday cooking filled the rooms. As they gathered around the table, Marco and Lucia, Rosa in one of her good moments, Eleanor presiding from the head of the table in her wheelchair, Marco was struck by how right it felt. This improvised family, brought together by chance and cameras and kindness, creating something whole from their individual brokenness. Eleanor raised her glass. To unexpected connections, she said, and to being seen, truly seen, by those who care enough to look. Marco met her eyes across the table, recognizing in them the same gratitude he felt. not just for the material improvements in their circumstances, but for the restoration of something more essential. The knowledge that they were not alone in their struggles, that being vulnerable could lead to strength, that small acts of kindness could indeed ripple outward in miraculous ways. To being seen, he echoed, raising his glass to join hers. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the city in gentle white. Inside Eleanor's apartment, warmed by food and friendship, 4 people who had begun the year as strangers celebrated the connections that had transformed their lives. Connections that had begun with a simple act of kindness, captured by cameras but defined by the human hearts behind them. In the months that followed, the story of the delivery driver and the disabled professor would become something of a local legend. Grocer Go's senior support initiative would expand to cities across the country. Lucia would complete her degree with Eleanor's mentorship. Rose's condition would continue its slow decline, but she would be surrounded by an extended family that included Eleanor and eventually her son David, who would return from Phoenix after recognizing through Eleanor's example that monitoring technologies were no substitute for human presence. But on that Christmas evening, none of these future developments mattered. What mattered was the present moment, the warm light, the shared meal, the simple gift of being truly seen and accepted, with all their limitations and possibilities, by the people around the table. And somewhere, unnoticed and unimportant, a security camera recorded it all. Another ordinary miracle of human connection in a world too often defined by isolation and indifference. The footage would never be used in a corporate campaign or go viral on social media. It didn't need to. The real transformation had already occurred in the hearts of those who had learned that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness happen when no one is watching, or perhaps more importantly, when someone is.